My earliest memories are of abuse at my mother's hands. A lot of beating, and I can remember me and my brother piling all the furniture in the house against our doors. And I've had her come through the window to get to me. Sexual started very early. She sexually abused me orally. Um, she made me do things to her. I was conditioned to think that it was punishment um, for something that I did wrong, uh, but I never could really pinpoint what I did wrong. It became so frequent that it was just a regular thing in my life.
The topic of abuse and trauma can be a difficult one for men to address. Societal expectations around male toughness and masculinity have forced many men to keep the pain buried deep inside. But listening to men's stories gives us a greater understanding of this gender phenomena to trauma. Justin was physically and sexually abused by his mother from an early age.
I know at about 8, she started to invite other people into this abuse. It's kind of crazy to say, but I almost welcomed the other women that she exposed me to, because I always knew that something wasn't right for my mother to be doing these things to me. I can remember her putting a large quantity of marijuana in front of us and having us help her bag it up. And while we were doing these things, she would offer the drugs to us and tell us, oh, it's good, it makes you feel good, it's fine, it's fine. And then the harder drugs came: cocaine, crystal meth, heroin, crack. She would show us how to do it. And by the time I was 12 or 13 years old, I'd already had addiction problems.
Carlos faced the horrors of war in both Iraq and Afghanistan.
My first deployment was to Iraq. We were in this town called Haklania, providing security for the election. I was on the roof of the school doing security guard of the perimeter of that school. So all of a sudden we start getting fire. I didn't know where it was coming from, but we would start getting fire. Like click, clack, clack, click, click, clack, clack, clack. I had a wall behind me, so that's where I saw the rounds hitting. I'm still not seeing who's shooting or where, but I see what the round is ending. It's really near me. So that was the very first experience with that feeling of I'm gonna die. And my second deployment was to Afghanistan. Afghanistan was really bad for me and for my unit. We got a lot of close, face-to-face situations with the enemy. We have our own guys blowing up with IEDs. We have even friendly fire, and that's even worse, because your own kind are shooting at you, and you start thinking, and it's another war. We're fighting 2 wars at once. It's the war that we're doing over there, and also the war in your head.
Carl experienced emotional trauma throughout his childhood.
I remember my dad being a drinker. He was pretty angry. We never had any father bonding. I never remember him hugging me at all as a child coming up. I recall him and my mom fighting often. And I remember one particular time we just saw this scene where my mom and dad were fighting, not physically, but verbally. He was verbally berating her, and then he threw a plate of food in her face and then knocked the plate across the room. We stood there afraid and didn't know what to do. That was a scene that stuck in my mind constantly, that helpless sort of feeling. One of the ways of disciplining during that time period was with a switch or a belt, and so obviously we would get beaten and we'd get beaten, and it was pretty much a pretty normal occurrence, we thought. And I kind of left home prematurely. I was 17 at the time, wasn't quite ready to leave, but there was another confrontation with my mother and him, and I stepped in between it. And that didn't go over very well.
The word trauma is derived from the Greek term for wound, a frightening or violent event that may result in a psychological injury.
The thing about trauma for many people who've never had a major diagnosable mental illness is it's this horrifying experience. So suddenly your mind, which you always thought was under your control, isn't. And you begin to have these intrusive, unwanted thoughts, flashbacks, and it's very disconcerting.
My family was saying that you're not acting the same way, you're not saying the same things, you're isolating yourself. My friends, I was just picking fights for anything, but at that moment, I didn't thought that I had PTSD, or I didn't even know what PTSD was back then.
The symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder are generally grouped into the following categories: re-experiencing the trauma in the form of intrusive memories, nightmares, or flashbacks, avoidance of external reminders, people, places, and things, persistent negative thinking, self-blame, detachment and depression, and hyperarousal, feeling jumpy and on edge.
Everywhere I go, very watchful, a lot of, fast breathing, heart pounding.
It used to be a source of relapse for me on a regular basis whenever I'd be around my family, especially my mother and my father.
Nightmares are the worst. It's very scary to wake up after a bad nightmare and experience that same vulnerable feeling that you felt at the time that the abuse was going on.
It is also more common for male survivors to report using drugs or alcohol to deal with feelings of shame and humiliation.
The drugs were my best friend. They were just my best friend, and I was very reckless with it because there's so many times that I'd overdosed, and if it wasn't for guys around me that knew what to do in that situation, I wouldn't be here.
I started smoking marijuana, I think when I was 14. Over time, I got introduced to cocaine. Some years later, I got introduced to crack cocaine. That was the beginning of a long, hard journey. And that journey lasted close to 20 years.
Men and women understand trauma differently and develop gender-related responses to violence.
Women tend to go more internal, whereas when you're talking about PTSD and trauma, what you may experience with male trauma survivors is a lot of more external emotions, which are also very painful. Rage, anger.
I was going around the town just like if I owned that town, maybe simulating what we did in Afghanistan, where a bunch of young men going around a town, armed to the teeth, doing, kicking, exploding, and eliminating threats.
My parents started to get calls from school saying that, Carl's not behaving, and he's disruptive in class, and he's not doing his homework.
At 17, I got into some trouble. Some of my friends said they had this deal that they could do, and it was a lot of money, and we ended up going into a home that was supposed to be vacant, and turned out that it wasn't vacant. There was an old lady that was there. We confronted her. Nobody was hurt, nothing like that, but we were eventually caught, and I was given a pretty lengthy prison sentence.
Stories of aggressive, sometimes violent behavior are not uncommon. Many men adopt an "I am never going to be a victim again" mindset that leads in turn to "and I will get him" before he gets me approach.
One day, not long after I was incarcerated, I had some guys come and they locked in my cell with me. And this is a small cell. You imagine your bathroom with a bed in it. You know, there's not much space. And I felt trapped. And I knew what they were there for. I knew the guys, I knew their reputation. I'd already been warned. And I knew that they preyed on new guys that came in. And I was young. So they attempted to rape me. And I fought two of them off and got to the guy with the knife. And we tussled and we fought. It just happened so quick that I didn't really have time to react at what was going on. And I ended up putting the knife in him and just pushing with everything I had because I was scared for my life. I knew that they would take it. And it was a very hard situation for me because this guy took his last breath on my neck. And that did something to me that I've never quite been able to recover from.
And we often don't think about the onion nature of trauma. It's not just the experience you've been through, but it's all of the real-life fallout that goes along with it. A series of re-traumatizations that sort of reverberated after the original event.
I tried going to school, use my GI Bill, and get a degree, which I always wanted. But I tried that, and it didn't work. So what's wrong with me? I mean, I used to be a 4.0 guy, so I was just at home, sitting at home, playing PlayStation, and sleeping all day and playing all night. Sleeping all day, playing all night.
So my crack cocaine use actually began to escalate. There was no way at that point that I could still maintain my job, my responsibilities. I could feel it slowly slipping away. It got to a point where I felt like I had lost everything, nobody to go turn to, and so I wound up going to a homeless shelter.
I tried to commit suicide. Cut my wrist pretty bad. And luckily someone found me in the shower, almost bled out.
The messages men have absorbed about what it means to be a man color everything about the process of recovery.
It shows some weakness or it shows a lack of control, and so men are very reluctant to seek help and then to even share.
Women are more likely to walk through that door that says behavioral health, enter here. Men less so.
They would send me appointments. I would show up maybe for once every so often.
I never properly dealt with it. I didn't face it. I think I was more hiding from it.
And usually what happens, and it speaks to the interesting thing about co-occurring, is the men who do walk through the door won't just have PTSD. At that point, things have gone farther. And so it's PTSD plus something else significant has happened. And usually what's bringing through the door, sadly, is it's entered some aspect of a crisis.
I was jealous because I saw some message in my wife's computer, and I just went off. I broke another computer that day. I started breaking all my military plaques, a war certificate that I have up on the wall. I broke everything. I threw everything. And at some point, my wife had our baby in her hand. She was probably 5-6 months old, maybe a little bit more. And I had a glass of juice, red juice, Hawaiian punch, and I threw it at her and I hit the baby. We were in our living room, so she's all painted in red. Our baby's all painted in red. The carpet is all red. And she got into one of the bedrooms and locked herself, and I'm banging at the door. So I went into the other bathroom, where I have a stash of all the pills that I have collected probably for the past year from the VA, which I never took them. And I just grab one bottle of that, open it, and stuff a bunch of pills into my mouth, and grab my keys of the car and started driving. Now when I open my eyes, I'm in a hospital with a bunch of stuff sticking to me. They told me that I was in a car accident. So that day changed everything. So after that, I started going to the VA, actually taking my medications, talking to the provider I had at that moment, and actually letting everything out that I had.
The link between trauma and the emotional destruction that often follows is undeniable. Therefore, assessment becomes crucial.
We know that the people walking into the substance use program, over 70% of them have significant trauma in their histories. We know that those people entering treatment for symptoms of trauma, over 50% of them will have substantial substance use problems. So to not rigorously go after the co-occurring is doing the clients a disservice.
And if I treat one without having treated the other one, then I'm really putting a Band-Aid on it, and those symptoms are most likely going to reoccur.
In addition to assessment, other key elements of a trauma-informed program are safety, collaboration, trustworthiness, empowerment, and choice.
You want to make sure people have choice, and here as we're talking about men or women, some of the choices might be things like, if you're going to do a group-based treatment for trauma, probably it should be gender specific. And again, talking about guys, group may be something too frightening for them. So as an agency or provider, can you make individual therapy an option? Culturally, are people in a group, if they're doing group therapy, with people that they feel they have connectedness to? That may be more important or less important to certain individuals.
For African American individuals, and there of course are exceptions, but as a general rule, we don't talk about trauma issues. So it's critically important that the provider has some cultural awareness.
Where you're able to do everything you can to make the experience of doing therapy as warm, accommodating, and safe as possible.
Sometimes the most difficult part of working with a male survivor is simply allowing him the time and space to feel comfortable acknowledging his past.
Eventually, I started to feel more comfortable talking about it, and I knew I had to actually get recovery.
These are deeply rooted and embedded experiences, and individuals have developed coping mechanisms and survival mechanisms that require them to suppress these issues.
You need a good therapist. You need a therapist who you have a positive relationship with. Probably the single most important thing in whether or not a therapy is going to work. Do you like your therapist? Do they like you? There really aren't great medication options for PTSD. The overuse of Valium-type medications, the benzodiazepines, which have no literature to support their use and may actually make things worse in the case of trauma. And people want them because they get that short-term relief from symptoms, and in the long run they don't make things better, and they'd likely make things worse.
Beyond medication, there are many powerful therapies available to help men in their recovery.
They're almost all based on cognitive behavioral theory combined with elements of something called mindfulness. Mindfulness is not something where you're necessarily sitting with your legs crossed contemplating your novel. It's being present in the moment. And it's not just therapy, it's also the kinds of things people can do to really increase their chances to move forward and become more able to get back on with their lives.
I have a really simple routine now. I go to the gym regularly. My spiritual beliefs now, my spiritual convictions are probably the strongest area of relapse prevention for me, maintaining a good level of sobriety, and not just sobriety from or abstinence from substances, but the sobriety of thought and balance in my life.
I lean a lot on my art. I draw, I paint, I actually learned to tattoo while I was incarcerated. It helped me to be able to open my art up to a different medium that I actually enjoy the most. Also, my work, I actually detail cars for a living. Probably one of the best jobs as an artist that I could have because I have an eye for detail. Also, this habit is actually, it calms my nerves. It helps me center myself and focus. It's something it's my one habit I can't break, and I don't think I want to break.
I try to keep myself busy with different activities. I like to play basketball with my friends. I'll go sometimes fishing. I have never caught anything, but I go out and just throw that into the water and spend some time, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends or co-workers. I went to University of Arizona for horticulture hydroponics certification, working with plants, how to manage the plants, but at the same time, the plant was managing myself, like my anxiety level slightly were going down. Church was really huge support for me. I did believe that if I let people in and I let God work with me, my life was going to be different.
Traumatic experiences are like broken bones of the soul, but they can be healed and become whole again, often stronger in the spot where they were damaged.
The trauma is something that will always be a part of them, but certainly will not impact their ability to have a full and wonderful life.
My relationship with my father today is great. There's no tension when we come around. Today, I'm just grateful that I have an opportunity now to take those experiences that I've had in my life and be able to really use them in a very practical way. I work with veterans who present with a wide range of mental health issues. I enjoy the work that I do. I feel very grateful for working in the environment that I work in because it helps keep it very green, so to speak. I see people struggling all the time.
I have a really good job where I can make a difference and have an impact in others' life and other people's life. I'm working with veterans at the VA, letting them know that we can grow strong together, that there is hope. My wife is here, my daughters are here. We started a new journey using the support of the church, using the support of the VA, and using, most important, using the support of this community.
My family and my animals are probably 85% of my recovery. My wife, she was such a savior to me. I love her so much. To have the love and acceptance and for someone to be proud of me like my family is and my sons are, it does something to me that I think no therapy has ever done. Every time I think to take that needle or that crack stem or that sniff out of a dollar bill, I think about what I'm gonna do to them. And I know a lot of people say, you gotta do it for yourself, you gotta do it for yourself, and that's true. But it helps to have somebody that you care about, that you don't want to disappoint. I don't want to be that same person I was. They make me better, and they make me want to do better.